Hi everybody, it's Nettie Kaye. Welcome back to my studio. Today we're going to be working on another oil portrait, the beginning of an oil portrait, of a little boy named Jeffrey. He's 7 years old and he also attends my Wee Da Vinci Academy with his sister Faith. And I wanted to paint these portraits for their parents who have just been so wonderful. In fact, their dad helped move for 2 days, helped move my son's heavy equipment into his new print shop. And I wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Milton. I really appreciate it. And so I hope these turn out really well for both the mom and the dad. Okay, now first off, I've done a little bit of a sketch ahead of time. I know a lot of you guys would really like to learn how to draw the portraits, but right now I'd like to focus on the painting part. We'll do a little bit of drawing here very shortly, and I'm going to actually work up to this so that you can learn how to do different features in some upcoming lessons. The first thing I'm going to focus on is thinking about, once I've got this whole thing out, I want to think about doing a tonal rendering. And the tonal rendering, often, I can do it with a pencil, which I've done quite a bit of already. And so I do the sketch like this, and then I come in with either what we call a tortillon or a blending stump, and then I make some of these wonderful shadows and soften edges like this. And that's basically how I get it started. But then the magic comes before we start painting. I spray it with some just some inexpensive hairspray across the top and allow it, it's aerosol, not the little pump spray. You want to make sure it's aerosol. And so then I allow it to dry. It's been drying for probably a good 45 minutes. And so then we'll get going on this next part, which is called the tonal underpainting, okay, or tonal rendering. It's not going to have the full color of the whole thing. I have burnt sienna and mixed with a little bit of transparent orange in oil paint. And this time I think I'm out of some clean thinner, so I'm actually going to be using a little medium this go around. The main thing is to make sure that the paint that you put on next is actually a transparent or translucent paint. All right, you don't want to put in a bunch of opaque paint because you won't be able to see through it. And so I'm going to cover the canvas with this kind of warm, rich, kind of natural color, and I might like it so much that I might just not even bother painting the whole thing in its full color. But we'll see. Sometimes you do get them to where they just look so wonderful. You just do them in what's called a monochrome study. And so we'll see what happens with this. There actually, sometimes the monochromes actually look better than an overworked oil painting. And I tend to do that from time to time, where I just absolutely kill paintings by overworking them when I should have left them in a looser state. How many of you guys have done that? I bet there's a few of you out there. You don't say, oh, it's done when it measures a ½ inch deep in paint. Oh my goodness. I have had a few of those. Okay, well now I'm going to just, instead of finishing this off, I'm going to now take a paper towel and I'm going to rub that in to a degree. Alright, I'm going to rub that in and I'll continue moving it down. This one seems to have a little bit of a lint problem. Probably should have used a piece of t-shirt. I'll pick it up a little bit and make sure that we get a nice little coating of our color all the way across the entire canvas. Now, if the only paper towels you have are really cheap and linty, just use an old cotton rag or, an old sock or something. Don't use something that's going to leave a lot of lint behind, or you're really going to have a mess in your paint. So make sure you're a little bit careful with that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my photograph and take a look at it. And I'm going to put a little bit of clean medium or a little bit of thinner on there. And I can go in and begin removing any of the lights. And so you see how I just put the light there. and I'm going to take a little bit off of the nose. I'm using a Q-tip at this stage. You can use a big rag if you want, or not a big rag, but a little paper towel or bits of pieces of rag to remove some of this before it dries. So that's the whole key, is we're trying to do this before it dries. And I see where the light's coming in. The light's coming in from my right side. And so I'm going to remove some of this with this little Q-tip. I'll flip it over and get a clean side. I can go through a lot of Q-tips by doing this. I think the last time we tried one of these, I didn't use the Q-tips as much as I used a rag. Anyway, I wanted to be able to get the detail a little bit tighter. I often don't do this, but I love the outcome. I'm going to pretend that this is going to be a final product this time, rather than just the underpainting. I'm not nearly as careful if I have if I'm just doing kind of an underpainting without thinking about this as a final product. There. Coming forward. Got a few teeth that are really bright. One of the mistakes that you will sometimes make is that you'll put in, you'll make the teeth too white and then they stick out like they're really too far out. And we put too much detail into the teeth, or you draw around each tooth. That can also really mess things up too. So, you know, just kind of mask them in a little bit. I don't know, we'll see how they turn out in the end. I'll bring this part out right here. And let's see, a little more up in here. Above there. Now is the time when I will get the rag out, or a little bit of the paper towel, and blend out the edges of that just a little bit. I'm going to pull this down a little more. This, yeah. Forehead's a little bit lighter on one side than the other because that's what makes it interesting. You want it dark on one side, a little darker on one side, and then it definitely, you want a source of light. You want to be able to tell where the source of light is coming from. Now I'll come down in the neck. Now this stays workable for quite a while. In fact, I've seen people actually work on them the next day. It's a little bit more difficult, but you can kind of add some thinner to your rag the next day and eliminate some of these things. So I just get a little bit more of that really super clean stuff, and I can focus on, you know, you think about how hard ears are to do. Well, actually, when you begin to think of them in just where is the light, what shape is the light, and what shape is the shadow, it makes it quite a bit easier. So I also want to go in and kind of think about where the light is going to come across this eye right here. Comes across, hits this side of the pupil, and then I have a little light that comes out there. Now he's got really light green-gray eyes. A little there. Now isn't that just gorgeous? Yeah, it is. So pretty. At this point, I think I will go ahead and mix up a little bit of darker paint in some of the darker areas, and I will use a just a tonal, a dark tone in the brown range. I have some burnt umber right here. It's getting harder and harder for me to squeeze paint out this week. So I'm taking a week off from teaching, and pretty soon I'm going to go down to Arizona and get a little bit warmed up. I'm very excited about that. Okay, now I'm going to come in and make this, because I know this is a kind of a black jacket, but I want to keep this in kind of the warm brown tone. So I'm just now going to go in and see if I can shape things out with a little bit of the a darker tonal value. At this stage, I'm going to grab a little bit of black, and we'll just have a little bit of fun and make these eyes kind of pop out. He's looking up. This is a tough one. So I'm going to make his pupils at kind of an angle. They're a little bit elliptical, but I can still see some of the top part. So it's really, really a challenge to get them right so that they look up this way and not just straight at you. It's just an odd thing that you have to really look and say, what am I really seeing here? And so I'm seeing an elliptical shape. It's only a slightly elliptical shape. I might have to correct that a little bit more. I've got to fix this. And one of the ways to do it is to say, okay, what is the shape of the iris or the cornea around it? And that will help you out a little bit. Now I'm going to grab some of the Prussian blue. I'm going to add a little tiny bit of orange to it, and we'll put make it just slightly gray-green. I'm not sure if that's my camera or if it's actually the color of his eyes, but let's just see what we can do. Now I'm going to come in and make these blue eyes blue-green, but these are blue to start with, like this. And again, the corneas are also slightly elliptical, so I have to be careful with that. Since I'm off to the side, it makes it a little challenging. Okay, now I'm going to add just a tiny bit of our brown color to it, just to make it look a little closer to the actual color of his eyes. This is just our base color, and then I'll go back in and restate those pupils because they do look a little bit weird. Get them just right. It's getting closer. And there will be a white spot that hits between the black pupil and the cornea, and it goes and it crosses over both sides a little bit on each side. And even if you don't see it, which I do see it, you put it in anyway, even if you don't see it. So there it just kind of brings the little drawing to life. There's also an interesting little bit of a highlight across the white of the eye. So let's see if I can get that to where you can see that a little bit. Yeah, there you go. You can really almost see it. And it only goes in the center of the eyeball as it sticks out. Right, like that. It exaggerated that so you could see it, hopefully. There. Now I'll take a little bit of our burnt sienna, and I'm going to now come in and make a little bit of a line up and over for the eyelid, and then up and around the eyeball right there. And then I'll do the same. I think I'll add a little bit of burnt umber as well. It's not quite dark enough, just to emphasize it a little bit. And then I'll come over here and do the same. Constantly ask yourself, what am I actually really seeing? You know, what shape is that really? How much of the pupil do I really see? How much of the eye am I really seeing? What does the eyelid really look like? Not just what you think it looks like. Your brain will play tricks on you, especially when you've got the head at a slight angle. Okay. Want to get too dark? it feels a little too dark, so I'm going to go back in with a Q-tip and soften it up a little bit. Cheek. This. And then it's also very dark right here, okay, right above the eye. So there's a shadow as the eye turns back. So now I'm doing the same thing. I'm just going to the tone with my Q-tip. See why I really go through a lot of them. I really do. And then I'm going to drag that down a little under the eye. If he doesn't have a shadow under the eye, his face looks really flat. So we'll make a little shadow under the nose. And then into this part of the eye right here. So the eyes sit back a ways. A little dark right here where he has a dimple down here. Like that. And we'll go inside the ear a little bit right here. That's with just a little transparent orange. And I'll do the same thing. And it has a little bit of the raw or burnt sienna in it. And that's starting to come together. Isn't that fun? So even you could probably almost leave it a little bit like that. Okay, so now I'm going to take just a little bit of my orange color, my burnt sienna, and a little tiny bit of cadmium red light, and I'll come back in and put indication of the lips so they don't look gray. We don't want gray lips. That's not very healthy. This. And then remember, the top lip in most cultures is going to be darker than the bottom lip. So now I'll go with that cadmium red light and raw or burnt sienna, and I'll add a little bit of white to it, and we'll come in and make a little bit lighter lip on the bottom. Yeah, it looks like Jeffrey. Here's another thing I might do. I might now go in with a Q-tip again and just put a light glaze of the cadmium red light. Now that seems really, really dark, and it is, but I'll wipe that down a little bit more, and then I'm going to put some just at the top of the nose right here, maybe in a little ball, we'll see, and then a little bit at the bottom of the chin, and then some on this where the cheek begins to turn back. I'm just laying that out a little bit. Some in the bottom of the ear, and where else do I see it? Maybe a little bit up here. Okay, and oh my goodness, in the inside of that ear right there is very, very hot. And then a little bit over here. Now I'm going to take another tiny bit of my paper towel or my little rag, and I'll rub that into tiny little circles right here. This is a very different way of doing a portrait sketch, so that it's just it's like almost like a colorized photo in a way, only it's a colorized pencil sketch. Does that make sense? His lips look a little bit on the red side, so I'm going to bring those back a little bit, and I'll tone this ear down a little bit. Put a little bit of that pink down in here too. Okay, go back in, and if it's this dark, you want to be careful. And I'm going to take my Q-tip and lighten it up a little bit. Maybe go around some of these teeth with a little tiny bit of coloration. The areas that come forward are the forehead. I think you remember that on the last baby painting. Forehead, the cheeks, the chin, and the nose all come forward, and so you want to make those nice and warm. Nice and warm. Okay, now at this stage, just to kind of, I'm not going to get too far on this one, but I'm going to now go back in with my raw umber. Got a little blue on there. I'm going to put the shadows. Now, even if a child is blonde, now I think Jeffrey's got kind of a light brown, a little bit of a little blondish, kind of dishwater kind of blonde, but pretty brown, just light brown. So I'm going to put in the shadows, regardless of how light their hair is. The shadows are always going to be pretty dark. In fact, most of the time, the shadows in the hair will be the darkest feature in the painting. The darkest color, the darkest tonal value will be found in the hair for the most part, okay? Now at this stage I'll go back in and get some more of that, I'll add some white to it. I don't want to make him into a redhead. That doesn't work. That's my color. So put a little bit. Now I'm not liking that too much. This is the neat part. You can just come back in and go, nope, all right. So I think what I need is a yellow ochre and white. Yellow ochre, maybe just yellow ochre. We'll see what happens with just yellow ochre, tiny bit of white in our highlighted area there. Now that's a little more blondish right there. Ease up on it, everybody. Don't jump in and just start painting real heavy. Regardless of how far I take this, I want to start with this nice thin application of paint. And then if I decide to just go all out and make a nice big thick, heavy painting, oh well, but start light like this. I'm really liking this right now, and I think, we'll see. Maybe I'll just take a break, go have a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever, and then I'll decide whether or not I want to keep going and making it darker and thicker. But wow, I like this kind of light rendition. Now I just took a tiny bit of our brown, the same brown color that I put in the hair, and I don't want to make the eyebrows too heavy because it's a child, There's not too many kids that have got really heavy eyebrows at this age. So even if it gets too heavy, grab another one of the Q-tips, wipe it down just a little bit so it's an indication, so you don't say, oh wow, look at those eyebrows, that's crazy. And we just do it kind of like that. I'm having fun, are you? All right. I'm going to do just another little bit of a red application. I really like it, so I'm going to do it one more time. It's almost like staining the canvas, okay? Just a little bit like staining the canvas with a little bit of the cadmium. And again, I'll come back in with a clean edge of my paper towel and just do one more little layer. Now I can allow this to dry and then do a second glazing of translucent or transparent color and just really make that pop out and come to life. Got to be careful I don't get too much paint on there, but I did want just a little bit more. See, at this stage I'm just going to leave the background nice and thin and transparent, and wow, I really like it. And I think I will do one more thing, and then I will darken a little bit of what's happening under the chin, just a tad, maybe with a little bit of some of our cadmium red with a little bit of the dark brown as a shadow. I'm using a rag a lot on this. I'm going to use a rag a lot because it just keeps it soft. So I lay the paint down in a few little areas, and then I take a little bit of that rag again and I rub that in. So it's not too dark, and it's certainly not going to be too sharp. You don't want it to be like a paper cutout. So soften up the edges by just going over it like this a little bit. Sure there's no weird marks, and then I'll come back in one more time with a little bit of a clean Q-tip and a dot of white, And I'm going to put that on there like this. And then, let's see, where else do I see that? Maybe just a little bit there and a little bit there. And then I will kind of wipe that off a little bit and tone it down just a tad. Right, like that. Just give it a little bit more of the highlight. Right there, a little more. Grab it. Some of it I just take off where I've laid it down if it's too heavy. It's almost like a glaze, but not quite. Bet you didn't know you could paint with Q-tips. Boy, do my kids ever use them at the academy. We use a lot of Q-tips, and we can get some pretty neat designs. That's for sure. Isn't this sweet? I just love the way this is turning out. And you know, every time we sit down to paint something, we always learn something every time we get out the paints. And what I'm learning with this one is that when we're painting a child's portrait, we need to go at it at a much lighter application. Don't get out big globs of paint and hope it's going to look like a sweet child. It's going to look like Winston Churchill if we're not careful. Use smaller bits of paint and kind of use a glazing technique where you add a bit of color here and there, rub it in with a rag or a Q-tip, and then if you need more, you add more. But don't start too heavy, and see what happens. Let me know if you get a chance to try this method. Let me know how it goes. All right, I'd love to hear from you. And if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and share with your friends. And I'll see you again